Number. Part 1. They banished her out to die. The alarm screamed through the lower decks of the colony ship at 3 in the morning. Han Yuna jolted awake in her small cabin, her medical training kicking in. Before her mind fully cleared, she grabbed her emergency kit and ran toward the life support section where the alarm originated. 7 people died that night. 7 innocent crew members who suffocated when someone tampered with the oxygen recyclers on Deck 12. Yuna worked desperately to save them, her hands moving with practiced precision, but she was too late. The bodies lay cold on the metal floor by the time the emergency teams arrived. 3 days later, security officers came for her. They dragged her from her lab in front of everyone, their faces hard and unforgiving. Director Quan Taeman himself read the charges: sabotage, murder, treason against the colony. The evidence was overwhelming, they said. Her access codes had opened the maintenance panels. Her fingerprints were on the control systems. Her shift logs placed her near the scene. Yuna protested. She screamed the truth until her voice went raw. She had been in her quarters during the incident. Someone had stolen her credentials. This was a setup, a frame job, but nobody listened. The trial lasted 4 hours. The council had already decided her fate before she entered the room. What Yuna did not know was the real reason for her destruction. 2 weeks earlier, she had discovered something in the planetary survey data. The world they were approaching, the paradise they had traveled 18 years to reach, was not empty. The scans showed massive heat signatures moving in coordinated patterns, structures that could be settlements. Signs of intelligence. The council knew about the aliens and had hidden the information. They planned to use the planet as a dumping ground for people they wanted to disappear. Yuna had made the mistake of asking questions. She had requested a meeting to discuss the anomalies in the data. That was when Director Quan decided she was too dangerous to keep alive. His son Minho had actually caused the malfunction while illegally modifying the air systems to give the wealthy upper decks better oxygen. Rather than face justice, Quan chose to sacrifice an innocent woman. The sentence was exile, not to a prison ship or a penal colony, but to the planet below. The dead world, they called it publicly. The world of monsters, they whispered privately. They gave Yuna a survival kit with 7 days of food, a medical pack, a vibro knife, and a locator beacon programmed to activate in exactly 1 year. They knew she would be dead long before rescue arrived. On the morning of her execution, they brought her to the launch bay. Park Ji-hoon tried to see her one last time. He was her partner, the man she loved, the father of the child she had only just discovered growing inside her. Security blocked him at the entrance. She saw him through the glass, his face pressed against the window, tears streaming down his cheeks. She wanted to tell him about the baby. She wanted to tell him she was innocent, but the guards shoved her into the escape pod before she could say anything. The pod was small and cold. Through the single viewport, Yuna watched the massive colony ship grow smaller. She thought about her parents who had died during the journey. She thought about the life she had built through hard work and determination. She thought about the unfairness of dying for a crime she did not commit. Most of all, she thought about the tiny life growing inside her that would never be born. The pod shook violently as it entered the atmosphere. Red clouds swirled outside the window. The planet below was beautiful in a terrifying way. Massive forests stretched endlessly in every direction. Mountain ranges pierced the clouds like broken teeth. Rivers of silver cut through valleys deeper than Earth's oceans. And everywhere, she saw movement. Vast herds of creatures flowing across plains, shapes circling in the sky. Dark masses shifting between the trees. The crash was worse than she expected. The pod hit the side of a cliff and tumbled down into a narrow valley. Metal screamed. Alarms blared. Yuna's head smashed against the restraints. When the pod finally stopped moving, she tasted blood in her mouth. Her ribs sent sharp bolts of pain through her chest with every breath. Her left arm hung useless at her side. She forced herself to move. The pod's door had buckled in the crash. She kicked it repeatedly until it gave way. Fresh air rushed in, thick and humid, and smelling of things she had no names for. The gravity was slightly lighter than Earth standard. The sky above was deep crimson, cut by two moons already visible in the afternoon light. Yuna gathered her scattered supplies. Half the food packs had burst open. The medical kit was intact, but the scanner was broken. Her vibro knife still worked. She had perhaps 4 days of food if she was careful. 4 days to figure out how to survive on a world designed to kill her. That first night, she huddled in the wrecked pod and listened to the sounds outside. Roars that shook the ground. Screams that echoed through the valley. Things moving in the darkness, their footsteps heavy enough to feel through the metal floor. She clutched her knife and tried not to think about dying alone. On the second day, her fever started. The crash had broken something inside her. Infection was spreading through her body. She used the medical supplies to treat herself as best she could, but her hands shook too much to do proper work. By the second night, she was delirious, drifting in and out of consciousness, her skin burning hot. That was when they found her. Yuna woke to the sound of breathing outside the pod. Deep, rhythmic breathing from multiple sources surrounding her shelter. She looked through the damaged door and saw eyes. Dozens of glowing amber eyes staring at her from the darkness. The creatures were massive, their shapes barely visible in the moonlight. Scales that gleamed like black glass, ridge-backed spines that stood as tall as her shoulders, claws that scraped against stone. They had come to investigate the strange metal thing that had fallen from the sky. They had come to see if the soft creature inside was food. Yuna should have been terrified. She should have screamed or fought or tried to run, but the fever had burned away her fear, leaving only a strange, calm acceptance. She stepped out of the pod on unsteady legs. The creatures went silent. She could feel their attention focused on her, like physical pressure. The largest one, a female with scars crossing her face and chest, stepped closer. This was the moment. This was where Yuna would die, torn apart by alien predators in the darkness. Instead, Yuna looked into those intelligent amber eyes and said the only thing that made sense. "I need help." Number. Part 2. The Valley of Teeth. The creature's scales rippled with bands of red light that pulsed from her spine outward. Yuna's fever-addled brain recognized it as communication, though she had no idea what it meant. The other predators responded with their own light patterns, a conversation in colors she could not understand. They were deciding her fate. Yuna swayed on her feet, struggling to stay conscious. The infection was winning. She could feel death creeping through her veins, cold and inevitable. If these creatures were going to kill her, she almost welcomed it. At least it would be quick. Better than slowly dying from fever and starvation. But the scarred female did something unexpected. She lowered her massive head and sniffed Yuna carefully, her nostrils flaring. Then she turned slightly, and moonlight revealed a wound on her flank. Deep gashes that had festered, leaking fluid that smelled rotten even from a distance. The creature was dying too, just more slowly. Yuna's medical training overrode her survival instinct. She saw a patient in pain. Without thinking, she took a step forward and pointed at the wound. The other predators tensed, their light patterns flashing angry red. But the scarred female remained still, watching Yuna with those penetrating amber eyes. Moving carefully, Yuna retrieved her medical kit from the pod. Her hands shook as she opened it, pulling out antiseptic solution and bandage packs. She approached the massive creature the way she would approach a frightened animal, slowly and steadily, making herself as non-threatening as possible. When she reached touching distance, she waited. The female lowered herself to the ground, bringing the wound within Yuna's reach. It was an act of trust that defied all logic. Predators did not trust prey, but something in this moment transcended the normal rules of nature. Yuna cleaned the wound as gently as she could. The creature's muscles tensed, but she did not pull away. The infection was bad, filled with bacteria that Yuna had no medicine for. But she did what she could. She flushed it with antiseptic, applied antibiotic cream from her human medical supplies, and wrapped it with pressure bandages. It was far from perfect treatment, but it was better than nothing. When she finished, Yuna stepped back. The scarred female rose to her full height, towering over the small human. Her scales rippled again, but this time, the colors shifted from red to blue, then to a deep violet that Yuna had not seen before. The other creatures responded with similar patterns. Then, without warning, the entire pack turned and walked away into the darkness. Yuna collapsed back into the pod, certain she had just hallucinated the entire encounter. She fell into fevered sleep, expecting to wake up dead or not wake up at all. She woke to sunlight on her face and the scarred female sitting outside the pod entrance. The creature had returned, and she had brought food. The carcass of something that looked like a six-legged deer lay at Yuna's feet, freshly killed. It was an offering, a trade, medical care for food. Over the following days, a strange routine developed. The pack would leave at dawn to hunt. The scarred female, whom Yuna began calling Kyra in her mind, would stay behind or return frequently to check on her. Yuna treated Kyra's wound daily, watching with amazement as it began to heal. In return, Kyra brought food and water, and eventually led Yuna to the pack's den. The cave system was enormous, carved deep into the valley cliffs by centuries of water flow. Multiple chambers branched off from the main cavern, each serving a different purpose. Sleeping areas lined with soft vegetation, storage spaces for food, a central gathering area where the pack assembled, and in the deepest chamber, the nursery where young ones played under watchful eyes. The pack consisted of 7 adults and 3 juveniles. Yuna learned to recognize each individual by their scale patterns and the colors they displayed. She realized the light patterns were language, complex, and nuanced. Red meant danger or anger. Blue was curiosity or question. Green indicated satisfaction or agreement. Violet was respect. The color they now showed her regularly. Yuna started teaching herself their language through observation and experiment. She would point at objects and watch their color responses. She would mimic their subsonic rumbles, the deep vibrations they used for long-distance communication. Progress was slow, but gradually understanding grew between human and alien. The breakthrough came 3 weeks after her arrival. One of the juvenile creatures, barely larger than Yuna herself, got caught in a rockfall. Its leg was crushed, bone protruding through scaled skin. The pack gathered around, their patterns flashing distressed yellow. They could do nothing. In their world, such an injury meant death. Yuna pushed through the adults and examined the youngster. The injury was severe, but not hopeless. She had the tools and knowledge to help. Working quickly, she gave the juvenile a sedative injection from her medical supplies. She set the broken bone, cleaned the wound, and stitched the torn flesh with surgical thread. The procedure took 2 hours. The entire pack watched in absolute silence. When the juvenile woke hours later, groggy but alive, something fundamental changed. The pack pressed their heads to the ground before Yuna, all of them showing pure white light patterns. She did not understand the significance then, but Kyra's actions made it clear. The scarred female touched her forehead to Yuna's, a gesture of ultimate trust and acceptance. Yuna was no longer an outsider. She was pack. Life fell into new patterns. Yuna learned to hunt with them. Though her human body could never match their speed or strength, she learned their social structure, the complex rules that governed pack behavior. The females led through strength and wisdom. The males provided support and protection. Everyone had a role. Everyone mattered. She taught them in return. Simple tools crafted from stone and bone, ways to preserve meat for longer storage, basic medical care for common injuries. They absorbed everything with startling intelligence, proving they were not simple animals but a sapient species in their own right. Kyra became more than a protector. She became a friend, perhaps the first true friend Yuna had known since childhood. They would sit together at the cave entrance, watching the moon's rise, communicating through shared patterns of light and sound. Yuna told her story through pictures drawn in dirt. Kyra shared tales of the pack's history through elaborate color displays. 3 months into her exile, Yuna realized she was happy. The colony ship seemed like a distant nightmare. Director Quan and his lies felt like they belonged to another life. Here, in this valley with these magnificent creatures, she had found something she never had among her own kind. She belonged, but peace never lasts forever. One evening, scouts returned with urgent news, their patterns flashing alarmed red and orange. Yuna could not fully understand their communication yet, but Kyra's response was clear. She gathered the pack for war council, her scales showing patterns Yuna recognized as grim determination. A rival pack was coming. And they were coming for blood. Number, Part 3, The Blood Covenant. The rival pack's challenge came at dawn. 3 enormous males appeared at the valley entrance, their scales decorated with patterns of white and gold that signified formal combat declaration. They dropped a bundle at the boundary line and departed without approaching closer. Kyra sent 2 pack members to retrieve it. The bundle contained bones. Specifically, the skull of a Vargesh warrior, someone from Kyra's pack who had disappeared during a hunt 2 weeks earlier. The message was clear and brutal. The rival pack had killed one of theirs. This was a declaration of territorial war. Through careful observation and Kyra's patient teaching, Yuna had learned enough of their culture to understand what was happening. The rival pack, led by a massive male named Thornak, claimed that Kyra's pack had grown weak. The evidence was Yuna herself. By allowing a prey creature to live among them, by treating her as pack instead of food, Kyra had violated sacred traditions. Weakness could not be tolerated. The strong consumed the weak. That was the law. The formal battle would take place in 3 weeks at the Red Sands, a neutral ground between territories. Each pack would bring their full strength. The winner would claim the valley and absorb the loser's strongest members. The rest would be exiled to the wasteland beyond the mountains, where nothing lived and nothing grew. Exile meant slow death by starvation. Yuna watched the pack prepare for war. They sharpened their claws on special rocks. They practiced combat formations in the valley floor. The juveniles were sent away to a hidden location for safety. The atmosphere was tense, filled with grim determination. But Yuna could also see the doubt in their patterns. Thornak's pack was larger. With 12 adult warriors to Kyra's 7, the numbers did not favor them. On the 3rd night, Yuna made a decision. She found Kyra alone on the cliff top, staring at the distant mountains where Thornak's territory began. Using the light patterns she had learned and simple drawn images, Yuna communicated her intention. She would fight alongside them in the battle. Kyra's response was immediate and emphatic. Violent red patterns flashing across her scales. Subsonic rumbles of negation that shook Yuna's bones. No. Absolutely not. It was unthinkable. Yuna was soft-skinned, fragile, without claws or armor. She would die in seconds. More importantly, her presence in the battle would make things worse. It would confirm Thornak's accusations of weakness and corruption. But Yuna was stubborn. She had been expelled from her own people and left to die. These creatures had saved her life and accepted her when her own species rejected her. She owed them everything. She would not hide while they fought for their survival. She would stand with her pack, or she would die trying. The argument lasted hours, conducted in broken, light speech and gesture. Finally, Kyra seemed to understand that Yuna would not be dissuaded. The scarred female made a deep rumbling sound that Yuna had learned meant reluctant acceptance. If the small, strange one insisted on dying with them, Kyra would not stop her. But Yuna must understand the reality. In battle, Kyra could not protect her. Every warrior would be fighting for their own survival. Yuna understood. She had 3 weeks to prepare for a fight against creatures that could tear her apart without effort. She could not match their strength, speed, or natural weapons, but she had something they did not. She had a human mind trained in science and medicine. She had opposable thumbs that could craft tools. She had knowledge of chemistry, physics, and anatomy. If she was going to survive, she needed to use every advantage her species possessed. She started by creating armor. Using shed scales that the pack left lying around the den, she fashioned overlapping plates, held together with sinew and plant fiber. The result looked primitive, but provided protection for her vital organs. She carved a spear from the strongest wood she could find, tipping it with sharpened stone. She was not strong enough to thrust it through Vargesh hide, but she did not need to. She only needed to target weak points: eyes, joints, the soft tissue under the jaw. More importantly, she used chemistry. The valley contained mineral deposits that Yuna recognized from her xenobiology training: sulfur compounds, nitrates, carbon-rich plant matter. She could make explosives. Not sophisticated ones, but enough to cause chaos and confusion. She spent days grinding minerals, mixing compounds, testing small batches until she found a formula that worked. She packaged the explosive mixture in hollowed bones, sealed with tree resin, creating primitive grenades that could be thrown. The pack watched her preparations with fascination. They had never seen tool use like this. When Yuna demonstrated her explosives by destroying a large boulder, their patterns flashed, amazed green and blue. Perhaps the soft skin was not as helpless as they thought. Kyra began training Yuna in pack battle tactics. The formations they used, the signals they employed to coordinate attacks, the honor rules that governed formal combat. No killing of surrendered enemies. No attacks on medics tending the wounded. No strikes from behind except in specific flanking maneuvers. War had rules, and breaking them meant losing honor more surely than losing the fight. The 3 weeks passed too quickly. On the morning of battle, Yuna painted her armor with mud mixed with crushed luminescent plants, mimicking the pack's natural patterns. She looked ridiculous, a tiny human trying to imitate a 12-foot apex predator. But the pack showed their approval with violet respect patterns. She was one of them. The journey to the Red Sands took 6 hours. They found Thornak's pack, already waiting. 12 massive warriors, each one scarred from countless battles. Thornak himself stood in the center. A behemoth with scales like dark iron, and patterns that pulsed aggressive red. He was easily twice Kyra's size, his presence radiating dominance and violence. When Thornak saw Yuna, his patterns flashed contemptuous yellow. He made a series of subsonic calls that Yuna's translator implant, which she had been teaching their language patterns, partially translated as mocking laughter. The prey thing was going to fight? The corruption was worse than he thought. Kyra's pack was not just weak, but insane. The battle began with ritual challenges. Each pack displayed their strength through coordinated light patterns and subsonic war songs. Then, at a signal Yuna barely detected, they charged. The Red Sands became chaos, bodies colliding with bone-crushing force, claws tearing through scales, blood turning the sand dark. Yuna stayed near the edge of the main fighting, targeting enemies who were already engaged with her pack members. A spear thrust into an exposed joint, an explosive thrown at the feet of charging warriors, causing them to stumble into ambushes. She was not winning fights alone, but she was tilting the balance. The turning point came when she saw a pack member go down with arterial bleeding from a torn throat. Yuna abandoned the fight and ran to the fallen Vargesh, her medical training overriding self-preservation. She clamped the artery with her bare hands, the blood boiling hot against her skin. She used battlefield medicine techniques, pressure, and improvised tourniquets, and desperate prayers. The fallen warrior survived. More importantly, 3 others who saw Yuna working rushed back to protect her while she operated, forming a defensive triangle. They understood. The small, strange one was not just a warrior. She was a healer. And healers were sacred in Vargesh culture. Protecting her was worth more than claiming kills. The battle raged for 2 hours. Yuna saved 4 more lives, each time under the protection of grateful warriors who returned to the fight with renewed fury. Her pack was smaller, but they were fighting with the desperation of those who had nothing to lose. And they had something Thornak's pack did not. They had unity forged through acceptance, rather than domination. When Thornak cornered Kyra, preparing to deliver the death blow, Yuna made her final gambit. She had saved one explosive for this moment, larger than the others, and rigged with a delayed fuse. She threw it at the cliff face above Thornak's position. The explosion brought down tons of rock, not enough to kill the massive warrior, but enough to trap his legs under debris. Kyra did not hesitate. She delivered the killing strike, while Thornak struggled to free himself. His death released his pack from their obligations. According to tradition, they could now surrender honorably. The ritual of submission followed. Thornak's surviving warriors pressed their heads to the ground before Kyra. 5 chose to join the winning pack. The others accepted exile without protest. This was the way things had always been, but then something unprecedented happened. Kyra's warriors, bloodied and exhausted, turned toward Yuna. One by one, they pressed their heads to the ground before her. Their patterns shifted to pure white, a color Yuna had never seen them display toward anyone, not even Kyra. Kyra approached and touched her forehead to Yuna's. Through their shared light speech and the translator she had been programming, Yuna finally understood the word they were all displaying. Vraskashin, the small goddess, the one who walks between death and life. They had not just accepted her, they had deified her. And the ramifications of that would change everything. Part 4. The Goddess Rises. News of the battle spread like fire through dry grass. Vargesh scouts, who had watched from distant cliffs, carried the tale to their own packs. A prey creature had fought alongside apex predators and survived. More than survived, she had turned the tide of battle. She had healed the dying and brought down the mighty. Within weeks, visitors began arriving at the valley. They came in small groups at first, cautious and curious. Scouts from distant territories who wanted to see the small goddess with their own eyes. They would sit at a respectful distance, their patterns cycling through confused blue and uncertain violet. Yuna would approach them carefully, showing no fear, and they would eventually allow her to come close. She would demonstrate her tools, her medicine, her strange ways. Some departed unconvinced. Others stayed. The pack grew. Within 2 months, 20 Vargesh called the valley home. By the 4th month, 40. They came from everywhere, drawn by whispers of a new way. A pack that accepted the weak instead of exiling them. A pack where healing was valued as much as hunting. A pack led by 2 females, working in partnership rather than one dominant individual. Yuna did not want worship. Every time a Vargesh approached with white patterns of divine recognition, she felt uncomfortable. She was not a goddess. She was just a woman trying to survive, trying to help others survive. But Kyra explained through their improving communication that Yuna misunderstood what the title meant. Vraskashin was not about worship, it was about transformation. Yuna was the catalyst that changed what Vargesh thought was possible. That made her divine by their definition. With the growing population came new challenges. The valley could not support so many hunters. Prey animals were growing scarce from overexploitation. Yuna introduced concepts that seemed obvious to her but revolutionary to them. Agriculture. Rather than hunting 6-legged deer to extinction, why not herd them? Rather than gathering fruit when they found it, why not plant trees in organized groves? The Vargesh resisted at first. These were prey activities. Soft skin, foolishness. Apex predators did not farm. They hunted. But hunger was a powerful teacher. When the choice came between starvation and trying Yuna's strange ideas, they chose survival. The first harvest of cultivated root vegetables changed minds. The first successful deer breeding program changed culture. Yuna taught them writing. She created a system using light patterns frozen in time, carved into stone, or drawn with luminescent plant dyes. Suddenly, knowledge could be preserved beyond a single lifetime. The elders could record their wisdom. Hunters could map territories. Healers could document which plants cured which ailments. Information became permanent. Metallurgy came next. Yuna identified iron-rich deposits in the valley cliffs. With Vargesh's strength to work the forge and human knowledge to direct the process, they began producing metal tools. Spear tips that did not break, knives that held edges, armor plates stronger than scale. Technology was advancing in months, what would normally take centuries. But progress bred resistance. Not all Vargesh welcomed the changes. An elder female named Shara led a faction that called themselves the Purists. They argued that Yuna was corrupting their species, making them weak by teaching prey ways. True Vargesh were hunters, not farmers. True Vargesh relied on claw and fang, not metal tools. By abandoning the old traditions, they were losing what made them apex predators. The Purists began sabotaging the new initiatives. Herded animals would escape through mysteriously opened fences. Planted crops would be trampled in the night. Written records would be destroyed. The incidents were small at first, easily dismissed as accidents. But they escalated. Yuna survived her first assassination attempt in month 7. A young male, his patterns showing zealot conviction, attacked her with a stone blade while she worked in the garden plots. Only Kyra's immediate intervention saved her life. The attacker was exiled according to pack law. But everyone understood the message. The Purists were willing to kill to stop the changes. Security became necessary. Kyra assigned permanent guards to Yuna, rotating shifts of loyal warriors who would die before allowing harm to come to the small goddess. Yuna hated the necessity, but understood it. She had become a symbol, and symbols attracted violence from those who feared change. The settlement grew beyond the original cave system. Using Vargesh's strength and human engineering, they constructed new buildings. Stone foundations supporting wooden frames, creating structures that could house multiple families. A central plaza for gatherings and trade. A dedicated healing house, where Yuna trained others in medical arts. A forge complex where metallurgy advanced daily. A library where written knowledge accumulated. 12 packs formally joined what they began calling the Covenant of the Small Goddess. Each pack maintained their distinct identity, but agreed to mutual defense, shared resources, and peaceful dispute resolution. For the first time in Vargesh history, packs cooperated, instead of constantly warring over territory. The Covenant's territory expanded to encompass half the continent. Yuna's pregnancy progressed through all these changes. Her belly swelled with Park Ji-hoon's child, a daughter she could feel moving inside her. The Vargesh found the concept fascinating and troubling. They bore live young too. But human reproduction seemed impossibly fragile. Yuna's pregnancy required 9 months, while Vargesh gestated for only 4. Human babies were born helpless, while Vargesh young could hunt within weeks. The guards around her doubled when the pack learned she was carrying a child. In month 9, the locator beacon activated. Yuna had almost forgotten about it. Buried in her survival kit and ignored for nearly a year, the device sent out a powerful signal that would reach any human ship within the sector. Suddenly, the galaxy knew she was alive. The signal was supposed to be a rescue beacon. Instead, it became her death warrant. Aboard the colony ship, Eternal Dawn, Director Quan Taemin received the transmission with horror. If Yuna returned alive, she could testify about what she discovered. The conspiracy would be exposed. His career, his freedom, his life would end. Quan made his decision quickly. A kill team would be dispatched under the guise of a rescue mission. 20 elite soldiers with advanced weapons and combat armor. Their orders were simple: eliminate Yuna and destroy all evidence of the Vargesh civilization. Use thermobaric weapons if necessary. Sterilize the area. Make it look like she died in a tragic accident before rescue arrived. Commander Ko Yarin accepted the mission without hesitation. She was a true believer in human supremacy, convinced that any alien species posed a threat to humanity's expansion. If these Vargesh creatures were sapient, that made them competitors for resources. Better to eliminate them now, before they developed technology. It was not murder. It was preemptive defense. Yuna learned of the incoming ship through her emergency radio. The automated response confirmed a rescue team was en route. ETA 14 days. She should prepare for extraction. She had 14 days to decide her future. Kyra found her sitting at the cliff edge, staring at the stars where the ship would appear. Through their years together, Kyra had learned to read human body language. She sat beside her friend and asked through light patterns what troubled the small goddess. Yuna explained as best she could. Humans were coming. They would offer her return to her people. But she knew the truth about Director Quan and his conspiracy. If she returned, she could expose him, clear her name, reunite with Ji-hoon. She could raise her daughter among her own species. That was what she should want. But Kyra's pack had saved her life. The Vargesh had given her a home when her own people threw her away. She had built something meaningful here. A hybrid culture that could bridge two species. How could she abandon them? And if the humans coming were truly rescuers, why did every instinct scream danger? Kyra's response was simple. Pack protects pack. Whatever came, they would face it together. Yuna was Vraskashian. She belonged to the Vargesh as much as to humanity. Perhaps she belonged to both. Perhaps that was the point. Yuna made her choice. She would not hide. She would meet the incoming humans, but she would meet them with her pack at her side, ready for whatever came. If they were rescuers, she would negotiate for recognition of the Vargesh covenant. If they were killers, she would fight. The radio crackled with an incoming message. Commander Ko Yarin's voice was professional and cold. Survivor Han Yuna. This is Rescue Team Actual. We have your location locked. Hold position for extraction. Do not attempt to move from landing zone. Acknowledge. Yuna keyed the radio. Acknowledged. Actual. But you should know something. I am not alone. I have friends here. Many friends. And we are not going anywhere. There was a long pause. When Ko Yarin responded, her voice had lost all pretense of warmth. Understood. Extraction team will adjust accordingly. Actual out. Kyra's scales flashed question blue. Yuna translated the exchange and added her own interpretation. They are not coming to rescue me. They are coming to kill us all. The war preparations began immediately. They had 14 days to prepare for humanity's arrival. 14 days to defend their home against the species that had created Yuna. The irony was not lost on her. She was going to fight her own people to protect aliens who had treated her better than her own kind. The Covenant mobilized for war. Part 5. The War of Two Worlds. The human dropship landed 300 kilometers from the settlement. Far enough to avoid immediate detection, but close enough for a rapid assault. 20 soldiers emerged in full combat armor, their weapons humming with lethal potential. Commander Ko Yarin surveyed the alien landscape with disgust. The planet was beautiful in its own way, but beauty was irrelevant. Only the mission mattered. Her orders were clear. Locate Han Yuna. Eliminate her and any witnesses. Deploy area denial weapons to destroy evidence of alien civilization. Return with proof of mission completion. The official story would be simple. Lone survivor died from complications before rescue arrived. Tragic, but inevitable. The sector would forget about Kepler 442d and move on. What Yarin did not know was that Vargesh scouts had watched the dropship land. They shadowed the human team from the moment they began their march toward the settlement. Yuna's network of runners carried information faster than radio signals. By the time the kill team was 6 hours into their journey, Yuna knew exactly where they were and where they were going. The Vargesh understood they could not match human technology in direct combat. Rifles that fired metal slugs faster than sound. Armor that could withstand Vargesh claws. Grenades that exploded with more force than Yuna's primitive explosives. The humans had every advantage except 3: numbers, terrain, knowledge, and surprise. The first ambush came on the second day of the human advance. The kill team was crossing a narrow canyon when Vargesh warriors attacked from above. Boulders rained down, crushing 2 soldiers before they could react. The humans responded with devastating firepower, their rifles tearing through Vargesh scales. But the aliens melted back into the landscape before the soldiers could establish effective defense. Hit and run. Strike from shadows and retreat before the enemy could organize. Use the planet's aggressive wildlife to create chaos. These were Yuna's strategies, warfare adapted from human military history and modified for Vargesh capabilities. The kill team found themselves fighting not just aliens, but the entire ecosystem that seemed coordinated against them. Ko Yeren realized within 3 days that this was not going to be a simple assassination. The aliens were organized, tactical, and being directed by someone who understood human military doctrine. That meant Yuna was not just alive but had somehow turned these creatures into an army. Yeren's contempt for the traitor deepened. Yuna had not just survived. She had betrayed her own species by arming primitives against humans. The commander made a fateful decision. She requested orbital support from the ship waiting in high atmosphere. Precision strikes from space would eliminate the alien settlements and end this farce quickly. The ship's captain approved the request. Coordinates were locked. Weapons charged. The bombardment came without warning. Hypersonic kinetic strikes from orbit. Tungsten rods accelerated to incredible speeds. 3 settlements were obliterated in seconds, their stone buildings vaporized by impacts that registered as earthquakes across the continent. Over 200 Vargesh died instantly, most of them elders and young ones who could not fight. Yuna watched the strikes from the main settlement's fortified position. She had expected this possibility but hoped she was wrong. The Covenant had evacuated civilians to hidden locations, but not quickly enough. The losses were devastating. Kyra stood beside her, the scarred female's patterns cycling through colors Yuna had never seen before. Not anger, not fear, something darker. Grief mixed with cold determination. But the orbital strikes had another effect nobody anticipated. Aboard the colony ship, Eternal Dawn, Park Ji-hoon had spent the past year investigating Yuna's conviction. He had uncovered evidence of Director Kwan's conspiracy, proof that his son Minho had caused the malfunction, and Yuna had been framed. When Ji-hoon tried to present his findings, Kwan had him arrested for sedition. However, Ji-hoon had allies. Crew members who remembered Yuna's kindness. Officers who were tired of Kwan's corruption. When news of the orbital bombardment reached the ship, when people learned that a rescue mission had turned into an extermination operation, outrage spread through the crew like wildfire. This was not what they had signed up for. This was not the colony they wanted to build. The mutiny began in engineering and spread to security. Within hours, Director Kwan and his loyalists were arrested. The evidence Ji-hoon had compiled was broadcast to the entire colonial fleet. The truth could no longer be hidden. Yuna was innocent. The aliens were sapient. And Ko Yeren's kill team was committing genocide in their name. The acting captain sent an emergency transmission to the surface team. Stand down immediately. Return to orbit for disciplinary proceedings. Any further hostile action would result in prosecution for war crimes. The orbital bombardment systems were locked out to prevent further use. Ko Yeren received the message in disbelief. A mutiny? Over aliens and a traitor? She had followed her orders perfectly, protecting humanity from potential threats. And now she was being called a war criminal? Unacceptable. She would complete her mission regardless of what the cowards on the ship decided, even if it meant she could never return. She led her remaining 18 soldiers in a direct assault on the main settlement. No more caution. No more tactics. Just overwhelming firepower and determination. They would kill Yuna, destroy this abomination of human-alien cooperation, and let history judge them. The Battle of the Valley began at dawn. The kill team approached the settlement's fortified entrance, a narrow pass between cliff walls that funneled attackers into a kill zone. Yuna and Kyra had designed the defenses together, combining human strategic thinking with Vargesh understanding of the terrain. The humans advanced behind a wall of suppressing fire. Vargesh warriors died in the initial push, their bodies torn apart by modern weapons. But each fallen warrior was immediately replaced by 2 more. The Covenant was fighting for survival now, and they would spend every life necessary to protect their home. Yuna coordinated the defense from a command position on the cliff walls. She was 9 months pregnant, her daughter due any day, but she refused to hide in the deep caves where other non-combatants sheltered. She was Vraska Sheehan, and her people needed to see her standing firm. The battle devolved into brutal close-quarters combat when the humans breached the outer defenses. In the narrow tunnels of the cave system, advanced weapons meant less. A rifle was just a club if you could not bring it to bear before claws ripped your throat out. The soldiers fought with desperate courage, but they were deep in enemy territory, surrounded by hundreds of apex predators who knew every twist and turn. Ko Yeren pushed toward the heart of the settlement, determined to complete her mission even as her team died around her. She found Yuna in the birthing chamber, a sacred space where pregnant Vargesh females prepared to deliver their young. Yuna stood there, visibly pregnant, a vibro knife in her hand, and a dozen pack mothers forming a protective circle around her. "You betrayed humanity," Yeren said, her rifle aimed at Yuna's chest. "You chose animals over your own species." Yuna met her eyes without fear. "My own species threw me away to die. These animals saved my life and gave me a home." "Who betrayed whom?" "Commander. It doesn't matter. You are a threat. They are a threat. I am ending this." Before Yeren could fire, Kyra crashed into her from the side. The 2 apex predators, one armored in technology, one armored in scales, fought with savage intensity. The other pack mothers joined in, their maternal instincts driving them to protect the sacred space. Yeren's armor held for precious seconds, then buckled under combined assault. Her last thought before darkness claimed her was confusion. How had prey become predators? The battle ended within the hour. The surviving human soldiers, seeing their commander dead and surrounded by hundreds of hostile aliens, surrendered. They were disarmed, but not killed. Yuna insisted on following human military law regarding prisoners. They would be held safely until the colony ship could retrieve them. 2 days after the battle, Park Ji-hoon arrived on a shuttle bearing white flags of peace. The new colonial administration wanted to establish formal contact with the Vargesh Covenant. They offered Yuna full pardon, restoration of her reputation, and compensation for her suffering. More importantly, they offered recognition of the Covenant as a sovereign nation with rights under interstellar law. Ji-hoon and Yuna reunited in the settlement plaza, surrounded by curious Vargesh who watched the 2 humans embrace with fascinated interest. They held each other for long minutes, both weeping for the year of separation and pain. He apologized for not protecting her. She forgave him because there was nothing to forgive. That night, Yuna went into labor. The birth was attended by both human medics from the colony ship and Vargesh healers she had trained. Park Dasam was born just before dawn, her first cries echoing through caves that had never heard human infant sounds before. She was tiny and fragile by Vargesh standards, but healthy and strong by human measures. Kyra was the first Vargesh to approach the newborn. The scarred warrior female, who had led countless battles and killed dozens of rivals, stood before the baby with her pattern cycling through awed violet. She touched her massive scaled hand to the infant's tiny fingers. Dasam grabbed one claw and held on with surprising strength. Kyra's patterns flashed pure white. The goddess had brought forth new life. The cycle was complete. The colony sent 2,000 volunteers to establish permanent human presence in the Covenant. Scientists who wanted to study this miracle of cross-species cooperation. Engineers who could help bridge the technology gap. Farmers who could teach advanced agricultural techniques. Teachers who could help create schools where human and Vargesh young learned together. The purists never fully disappeared. Shara and her followers established their own territory, far from the Covenant, maintaining traditional ways and rejecting human influence. But their numbers dwindled as younger Vargesh saw the prosperity and peace the Covenant provided. Change was inevitable. Resistance was just delaying the future. 5 years after her exile, Yuna stood on the same cliff top where she had first met Kyra. The valley below had transformed into a thriving city, where two species lived in imperfect but functional harmony. Stone buildings stood alongside grown crystal Vargesh structures. Human children played tag with Vargesh cubs in carefully supervised groups. The forge produced both traditional weapons and new tools neither species could have imagined alone. Park Daesam, now a bright and fearless 5-year-old, was currently chasing a Vargesh juvenile through the plaza below. The young Vargesh was intentionally staying slow enough for the human child to almost catch up. Their version of play that built bonds between species. Dasam spoke both human languages and subsonic Vargesh. She was the first of a new generation that would grow up never knowing a world where the two species were not intertwined. Kyra joined Yuna at the cliff edge, moving more slowly than she once did. The scarred warrior was aging, her scales losing some of their luminescent brightness. But her mind remained sharp, and her leadership unquestioned. Together, they had built something impossible. A civilization where prey and predator were not enemies, but partners. "Do you regret?" Kyra asked, in their shared language. A hybrid of subsonic speech and light patterns that both species could understand. Yuna thought about the colony ship, about the career she might have had, about the life she was supposed to live. Then she looked at her daughter laughing below. At the city they had built, at the thousands of lives saved through their cooperation. "They tried to make me die," Yuna said slowly, making sure her light patterns matched her words perfectly. "Instead, they made me become something impossible. Something better than I could have been alone." She turned to face her friend, her sister in everything but blood. "I don't regret. Not for a single moment." Kyra's patterns pulsed agreement and affection. They stood together in comfortable silence as the crimson sun set over their world. Two apex predators from different evolutionary paths who had learned that the strongest weapon was not claws or guns but understanding. That the greatest achievement was not conquest but cooperation. Below them, Daesam's laughter mixed with Vargesh chitters of amusement. The sound of a future neither species could have predicted, but both would build together. The future of a world where the monsters became saviors. And the goddess they created showed them a better way. The galaxy would remember the story of Han Yuna, the woman who was cast out to die and instead became the bridge between worlds. But Yuna herself cared nothing for legacy or legend. She was simply Pack, and her pack was home.